meeting of the Attleboro School Committee is called to order. Please rise and join the committee in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being electronically recorded, and first on our agenda tonight is two consent agenda items. First, a motion to accept a donation in the amount of $100 from the Attleboro Art Museum to the Attleboro High School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Second is a motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,100 from the Attleboro Rotary Club for purposes of promoting the Attleboro School System's new mission statement.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? For those who are unaware, this is part of the rebranding effort that comes in conjunction with the adoption of the district's new mission and vision statements. That is part of the strategic planning process that we'll be discussing in greater detail in just a minute. Mr. Larson has been kind enough to serve as a liaison to the Rotary Club, of which Mr. Wood, of course, is a regularly attending member as well. The Rotary Club, some years back, donated to the school system banners proclaiming the district's then motto, which was an excerpt from the then vision statement. And as we now have a new mission statement and a new vision statement, we needed to make sure that the banners are up to date. That was part of how we got to a place where we needed to officially adopt a particular shade of the color blue. So it's been quite a journey to get these up, and I wanted to thank Mr. Larson and everyone at the Rotary Club for their efforts in helping us to make sure that we are communicating in as robust a fashion as possible what it is that we're trying to achieve as a district, which is, of course, to engage, challenge, and inspire students and move the school system to the center of the community. So, again, Ms. Larson, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. We'll move on to our business agenda. And we start, and when we have this as an agenda item, we try to do it first, in part because we try to make sure that as wide an audience as possible have the opportunity to hear about the ongoing efforts by the Strategic Planning Ad Hoc Committee to develop the overarching goals for the district by which we as a school community will measure our progress in the ensuing 5 years. Obviously, we've already reached the culmination of the first phase of this process in, as I said, the rebranding of the district with the adoption of new mission and vision statements. We are now, frankly, we're really moving into more of the meat of the strategic planning process. We've discussed at this table several times over the past couple of months the draft overarching goals, which will be summarized in a minute. Mrs. Scales and Mr. Sawyer, who have served as the co-chairs of the strategic planning group, along with a group of dozens of volunteers representing staff, community, families, and just about everyone else. They are now at the stage where they're developing the objectives and the action steps that will help to move those goals forward. And I wanted Mr. Sawyer and Mrs. Scales to talk a little bit tonight about the specificity that's coming into sharper relief as part of this process. And my hope would be that there may be some questions or comments from the committee related to work that will be coming to us in the form of proposals sometime in July and early August, and the hope of starting the 15-16 school year as the first school year, frankly, with a comprehensive strategic plan that talks about what it is we as a district are trying to achieve. So, Mr. Sawyer, you can take it from there and tell us what we need to know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have 3 draft overarching goals for the district. Those goals have been vetted and revised based on feedback from the community. They continue to stay in draft form. We haven't done anything to formalize them, and we anticipate that there might be some further modification of them as we continue to work with them and start to have a better sense of exactly what they should say based on the level of detail that we're now starting to operate at. Before they were sort of just lofty general statements, and as they will remain that way, now the detail that gets behind them helps us to better understand what they really mean. We start to think about things a little bit differently. So the overarching goals provide a framework for the plan, as do the pillars that we've described on many occasions and shown our nice Greek temple as a way of communicating what we mean by that. So for each goal, there are objectives that are specific to how we will achieve that goal. So the idea being that, all right, how do we, over time, because it's a strategic plan for 2020, so over the next 5 years, how will we make progress towards achieving this goal? And so the objectives are a way to specify what we mean by that particular goal and the kinds of things that we think we need to do to make progress. And we've organized the objectives around those 4 pillars. So for each goal, there are objectives, and the objectives are organized by the pillars, which are learning, culture, engagement, and infrastructure. So that's the structure of the plan.
I'm sorry, can we say that again? Because I want to make sure we get to the point where if we issue a pop quiz amongst staff, students, families, anyone else willing to understand that this is a long, slow process that we're trying to move the district forward, those 4 pillars are things that people should be cognizant of. And I understand that not everyone's going to sleep with a copy of the strategic plan under their pillow, and I don't expect that to be the case. But I do expect it to be the case that, particularly amongst the district leadership, we understand how it is that we're carving up the district, and that is learning, engagement, culture, and infrastructure.
Yeah.
So it's learning, culture, engagement, and infrastructure.
Learning, culture, engagement, and infrastructure, yes.
Thank you.
So we have draft objectives, which have been presented to you this evening, which I'm happy to answer any questions you have about. And now we're moving beyond that to get down to the next level of detail, which is that under each objective, we're trying to have another level of specificity. Say, okay, what exactly do we mean by this objective? And we're trying to come up with statements that specify what we would, in concrete terms, be looking for the district to accomplish in about a 3-year time span, which is the way we're thinking about it. It's a 5-year plan, but to imagine what we would be doing in 5 years is difficult. Plus, we need time to evaluate and devise a new plan. And if you're not working on it in year 3, you're not going to get it done in 5 years anyway. So we're kind of imagining out a 3-year time span. So we are specifying what we're calling at this point outcomes, which will give a better sense of what we mean by these objectives. And we're also working on trying to identify who in the district will be assigned the task of doing this work. And the groups vary as we start to think of them through, but sometimes it's teams that already exist in the district. Sometimes it's things that are kind of general, like the central office administrative team. Other times it's things like a subcommittee of the school committee. So we're trying to say who is the most appropriate person to own these tasks and to take this issue further. So I thought tonight I would just highlight the work by giving you going over a couple examples. The first I'd like to talk about is for Goal 1. If you remember, Goal 1 was that APS will place students at the center of all educational decisions through guided planning to achieve personalized goals. And I just wanted to highlight for Goal 1, Objective B under Culture, which is to create a district-wide shared responsibility for individual student outcomes. So we think if we're really going to achieve Goal 1 and put kids at the center, and have it be guided by, personalized goals, we need to collectively share student outcomes. And what we mean by that is the idea that, when students walk across the stage at the end of their senior year, that is an achievement for the district. And we have for too long, too narrowly considered that to really be the accomplishment of the people who work with seniors. Only when everyone who contributed to each of those students' success, until we all celebrate in that achievement, we're missing out on the opportunity for people to understand in a real tangible way how their work is connected to the bigger picture. So, as we were working on outcomes for this, one is to reimagine the high school commencement as a district celebration rather than just a high school one. So that's an example of some way that we'd like to change the culture here in the district to better serve the students.
Any questions or comments? I mean, I think, first, I agree. I do think that's an important outcome. It's a good concrete example that is representative of something more abstract, that this notion of commencement as the biggest event on the school calendar across the district, and something that is an opportunity for the community to come together on the front lawn of the community and to, collectively to celebrate the district's success. And I think that, I think that there was a time, frankly, in Attleboro where, there was a longer line of people in caps and gowns because that was the expectation that that this is a district-wide celebration. Now, is that really part of what was part of a culture that is more in the place that we're talking about now, or was it just something that we had someone coordinating commencement and part of it was, make sure you drag some people up from the middle school to walk? I mean, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not just trying to make this an event-oriented strategic plan, but to actually shift the culture in a way where it would be just second nature for individuals across grade levels to understand that commencement is a big day on everyone's calendar and not just the high school. Mrs.
We
Scott?
also, what made us think about that too was our spotlight event when the seniors honored the teachers and have the ones that coming from the elementary school up. It really meant something to those teachers so that they can really see the progress.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Withers, did you have a?
I did, but it's kind of changing tracks a little bit, so.
Well, just to follow up on that point, that spotlight event is a very nice thing. The school committee loves doing it. We appreciate the staff members who come out. We appreciate the administrators who help us coordinate it. But it's representative of what we're trying to do in the bigger picture. So I appreciate the fact that we're able to sort of extrapolate out from a very nice evening to something that hopefully is more consequential. Mr. Withers?
Thank you for sharing the potential outcome that would go with that, because that was one of the questions I was going to have is what those would look like. So now that I can understand it a little bit better, what is it my understanding from what you're saying today that the outcomes or potential outcomes are being worked on now as well, while the objectives are still being tweaked, so they're kind of being worked on together?
Exactly.
Okay.
And where we see overlap, we might change them and revise them. But yeah, again, each time you delve down into a deeper level of detail, it helps you to think about what it is you thought you meant on the more abstract level.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Tyler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sawyer, this in culture objective C, provide students with greater opportunity to participate as school community members. Has there been anything floated around about? I realize we're just starting to build something, but has there been any ideas on that front?
Yeah, no, we talked about that. We need structures at all levels to be very clear that for students to not be given figurehead roles, but to have actual decision-making power in the school, and that we want to be clear here. We don't want to let elementary age kids start running the elementary schools. I mean,
Doing the evals?
yeah. That's not what we're talking about. But we oftentimes forget that if you put kids in the right place and you build the right structures around them, they can really have a powerful impact on decision making, because their perspective is important because they're the ones we're serving, and we need to do a better job of that. And we think that kids will care more about their schools and be more engaged in it if we care to ask them a little bit more often about what we should be doing in an authentic way. So we talked about the need to build systems that allow for that, and to talk about how at different levels it'll look differently. The high school does that a little bit better because they have older kids and it's more traditionally part of what they do. But what works at high school is not going to work at an elementary school. We have to, again, at each level, think about what that would look like and then build those programs across the district.
Thank you.
I think it's rare to see an example of something that is so multifold with regard to the benefits that it can yield. I mean, on one hand, the decision makers, people at this table, the people in the administration, can make better decisions when students are at the table. In addition to that, as I suspect Ms. Parika would attest as the student representative to one of the interview committees that is presenting tonight, it is a tremendous learning experience for the students themselves to actually participate in adult level decision making and to really sort of catch a glimpse inside sort of the professional world. And also, I think it provides students with a bigger stake in their school community in a way that they feel a sense of ownership in a way that...
Yeah, and by way of a specific example, we talked about the fact that we're spending all this time building the Leadership Advisory Board, the lab, and how there are obvious places where we should be including students in that process, that their voice should be, not something that we have to remember to include, but should be a regular part of what goes on there.
Thank you.
So the next one I wanted to talk about was Goal 2. Goal 2 was APS will improve the quality of education for all students by providing learning experiences that are personalized, challenging, and have lifelong value. I wanted to highlight under the learning pillar, Objective B, revise all curricula to reflect the district's vision for quality learning experiences. So this is a pretty straightforward, we're saying that we have an idea of what we think quality learning experiences looks like, and we need to now go back and make sure that what we're delivering in the classroom represents that. So that'll be a very complicated undertaking to go through all of our curricula to make sure that we can say how that class supports that outcome.
Any, Mr. Tyler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on that, on
Yes.
Objective A, and I couldn't agree more. But I'm having a little contrast in my mind here, because when we want to start a new program out, we have to give it a sufficient amount of time. And we're doing upon what the students want in the schools, but obviously, what they want is going to change over the course of a couple of years. But when do you reach that point where you say, well, they wanted to have this, we did that program, it's not succeeding, it's failing our expectations because we're limited financially
Yeah.
to what we can do. So, and we want it to be student-driven, what we're doing here.
Yep.
But where is that little balance taken in?
It's a delicate one. We certainly need to have evaluation of all the things we do to be a better part of how we operate. If we're going to be responsive, then we need to know what's working well and scale those things up, and what isn't working well and scale those things back, or fix them if they're things that have to be done one way or the other. So, a lot of times we put a lot of our time into planning what something's going to be, and then we just throw it out there and hope for the best that it works out. I think that our strategic plan is a very strong example of how we're going to build in better systems by which we evaluate our work so that we can be responsive to the quality of the output. But there's another component to what you're talking about in terms of letting student interest drive what we do. I think we have to be careful when we make choices. I don't think we should fall into the trap of being too trendy or following fads. This is an education system, and what we have to deliver should last beyond what's popular today. And I think there is a way, and I think good educators are generally sensitive to this. There's a way to be contemporary without necessarily letting whatever in the moment is popular become the priority, rather than it can flavor what you're doing, and so as the flavors change, you kind of make adjustments along you go. But the heart of what we're doing shouldn't be something that is too topical for the moment.
It's okay not to be hip on occasion.
Yeah, well, sometimes that's exactly what hip is, right?
That's a fair point.
No, thank you. I was a great answer. But kids change on what they want to do.
Yeah, always.
You know what I mean? So that's what we're here for. We're here for children's education, but yet we have to have some type of criteria for if we're going to bring something into school, whether or not it's sustainable in the long run or not,
Yeah.
and what it's actually going to bring to our school district as a whole.
But
Because
for example, we're always going to teach English. That's not going away, whether kids decide that English is no longer hip or not. We're going to teach them English, but what we choose to read can be sensitive to the tastes of the kids that we're teaching, and it should be, and it is.
Right, because I think the other side of Mr. Tyler's question, which I think is an excellent one, is it's not just the interest, but it's the needs, because the needs evolve over time, and we've seen that
Yes.
in different industry and in different fields, and that's why, the question is, how do we know when we reach this goal? I mean, we're never going to reach that goal. We're just going to have to, our goal is to continuously be pushing toward it and always be making progress. But I think that's a very good point. Mr. Larson?
Well, I guess I'm thinking, just, kind of building on some of Mike's comments, I would think with any of the goals, there's gonna have to be some sort of annual review and and as part of that, you would set your milestone for the following year. And then at the end of that, did you reach that milestone? Did you not reach that milestone? And part of that evaluation is, are we in fact on the right path? Are we not on the right path? And, do we need to put more emphasis on that? Because, I think without some periodic, whether it's annual or semi-annual, whatever the group decides to do, review of that, you never know, we thought we could do this in 5 years, and after 2 years, it's very evident this could take 10 years, at the rate that things are going. So, I mean, I'm assuming there's some periodic review process in all the
Yeah,
goals.
yeah,
so-
and, there's the, famous quote about battle plans, being great until you actually get on the battlefield, and then, almost instantly they don't match up. We have to be responsive to the changes, and we have to be able to see where things we didn't anticipate are creating obstacles and opportunities and make adjustments. In fact, former attempts to do strategic planning in this district failed precisely because the plans themselves were very rigid, and once things started to get in the way, we just abandoned the plan, which is not what good planning would have you do.
No, it's not. It's a very critical point, and one that I know we were going to briefly touch upon tonight, but I'll just say it now, that a critical component of this strategic plan will be the processes that are incorporated into it to evaluate the results and to adjust accordingly over that period of time. And the culmination of that, frankly, is the last page of the strategic plan will be the preparations for the next strategic plan, which will start with, as this one did, a very thorough research phase and an auditing of the district, so that way we can get a sense as to where we are as a school system, where we are perceived to be, and what the challenges are for the 20s. Maggie era. This is Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarity purposes, if we will, because we're not trying to pick on one area of what we do being a comprehensive high school, but we can take it all the way up to an AP class where there may be some students that want AP chemistry, but are we prepared as a school district to teach that in the middle school level? So when they come into the high school, they're actually prepared to take these classes. Because if not, that class is doomed to fail.
That's right.
There's a need for it, but we haven't built the support system to get it there. So I just want to make that clear. It's not like we're saying, okay, well, CSI is a big thing, so we're going to have a CSI class. There's bigger things than that.
Yep.
There's AP course loads and stuff like that. Are we prepared to make sure that if we're going to offer this, we've given them support in the lower school levels to make sure they can succeed? And
Absolutely.
we're not having a failure rate that is unacceptable in any levels.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next, it's still in Goal 2, under the engagement pillar, Objective A, cultivate partnerships to strengthen experiential learning opportunities at all levels. I like this objective because it's the intersection of two important ideas. One, in our mission statement, we talked about relevant learning experiences that engage, challenge, and inspire. Our experiential learning program, which is still growing and I'll call it nascent in its form, but we have a vision for expanding it and offering more and more opportunities for kids to go out and learn about the world in the world rather than in the classroom. We think that if we're going to make learning relevant, if we're going to challenge, engage, and inspire students, we need to do more of that than we currently do. So we want to do that, but we also talk about the need to engage the community. We have this vision of our school system in which we're going to make it the center of our community. Well, if we're going to do that, then we need to get the community involved in what we do. And so this objective does a really nice job of bringing those two things together, right? So we're going to look out in the community for the opportunities for kids to have those learning experiences in the world rather than in the schools.
Gordon? Which instantly is rather hip currently right now. The experiential learning momentum has built considerably, but I think it's an example of how hipness can occasionally be a good thing.
Well, I would say the world is catching up with us on that one.
Maybe that's true.
All right, so then my last one, under Goal 3, which was APS will cultivate and extend community partnerships to improve outcomes for students through outreach, collaboration, and reciprocal support. Under infrastructure, our fourth pillar, Objective C, investigate proper systems for supporting increased public permeability of schools. I bring up this one because, we're talking about having greater community engagement. We talk a lot in the strategic planning about the need for us to be out in the community more, but the community to be in the schools more, to think of the schools as the learning hub of the community. If we're going to do that, that's going to mean that we're going to have a lot more people in and around the schools. And one of the essential beliefs and one of the things that you'll see in the plan is a focus on school safety. So it's we have to think through the impact of everything we're going to do. If we're going to invite people in to help us do our jobs, then we're going to have to make it so that coming in is a pleasant and easy process. And we're going to have to find a way that we do that so that everyone is still safe, and but people at the same time are not being treated like they're a threat to the safety of the community. So these are things we know that we're going to have to find a way to work out, and that objective is again, an attempt to achieve one goal, but while not sacrificing another.
Thank you. Important point. Any questions or comments either about goal 3 or the overarching goals? And these are just obviously examples that we wanted to share tonight to help advance this conversation and to put the district, as we have tried to do in the countless times we've discussed it here, and in the near monthly focus group or public comment opportunities that we've convened over the course of the past year, or through the convening of an ad hoc committee made up of dozens of stakeholders representing various constituencies that grew out of the research phase of the superintendent selection process 2 years ago. All of this is our way of putting the district and the community on notice as to what it is we plan to achieve, and the work that will be the focus of this district in the coming years. There was a community member who I spoke with some months ago and talked about the need for this process and this plan that Mr. Sawyer and Mrs. Scales and the rest of the volunteers have been working so diligently on, the need to continue to shine the spotlight on the process and on the plan as it comes into as it starts to be realized, and that the person commented to me that they found that kind of boring, and that perhaps that was just inside baseball. If you find it boring, if you find shifting the focus of the Attleboro schools to teaching and learning and setting an ambitious set of goals and objectives that we believe will benefit current and future students such that they will enjoy greater opportunities, if that's dull, if that's dry, we understand. There are other things you can watch. There are other things you can engage yourself in. There are other places to go. We encourage you to do that. Our focus, the focus of this district, the focus of this administration, the focus of this school committee, will be on improving teaching and learning for students so they enjoy greater opportunities when they graduate, period. I know that's not always popular because there are plenty of things that we could focus our attention on, but that's what we're going to do. So to everyone on the ad hoc committee, I want to thank you again for the work that's continuing. I've said a couple times in the last couple of meetings that I never quite understood why the school committee takes such a long break during the summer when it's a time where we could actually sit down and have thoughtful conversations that have significant consequences for our district and for students. And so we will continue to convene and continue to hear these proposals, and ultimately my hope would be by early August that we'll be in a position that we'll be able to adopt a plan which will include all of the types of checks and balances and ways to gauge our progress on these goals in the coming years. So again, Mr. Sawyer, Mrs. Scales, thank you, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the coming weeks and months. Our next agenda item is the appointment of two individuals who, one who has for several years and one who will for several years, advance those goals and advance those objectives. Mr. Sheehan tonight is appointing two new assistant principals to his leadership team, and I'd ask both of those individuals to come forward and join the committee at this time. With the transfer of Dr. Souza to Brennan Middle School and the promotion of Mr. Connor to as the principalship at Wamsutta Middle School, there's some moving and shaking taking place in the administration. So, Mr. Sheehan, I'd ask at this time that you announce your appointees.
Members of the committee, it's my pleasure to introduce to you two new members of the Attleboro Public Schools administrative team. Let me first start out with our high school appointment in Montagano. It is a great pleasure to be able to look at our teacher leaders within the district. People have committed most of their life, their professional life to the district, and Ann Montagano is one of those people who's just completed her 20th year in the district. As many of you may know, that Ann started as a graphic design teacher in our CTE program, and then transferred into the visual arts department in 2005, just 10 years ago. Ann is an extremely well-respected member of the faculty. She has earned a master's degree in administration, and she continues to work very, very hard as a teacher leader within the school district. She co-chaired the last successful NIAS self-study, in which the school, in fact, was accredited after being on a warning status. And I think we owe her a great deal of thanks because I know that that's a lot of work, and sometimes it's not as rewarding as it possibly could be. She also served on the steering committee, which still provided us at Attleboro High School with the trimester scenario and schedule, as well as the Newhouse type of scheduling. Ann became the Dean of Students in 2011, has done a great job, and she has been well respected as evaluating teachers and guidance counselors, and in fact, she's an invaluable commodity. Ann will bring a thirst of knowledge to our administrative team, a willingness to learn, and the tireless work ethic which she has exhibited throughout her entire career. Ann Montagano, I'm very pleased to introduce her to you. And she brought her supporter tonight with her. Elizabeth, her daughter, is here and came with her to see her mom be promoted.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I'd also like to thank the members of the screening committee who showed me their support and devoted many hours of their time to this process. I'm both honored and excited to become a member of Attleboro High School's admin team. I look forward to working with fellow administrators, department coordinators, and the school committee. I'm proud to say that for the last 20 years, I've been a part of Attleboro High School's hardworking, devoted staff. My aspirations now are to lead them in the pursuit of high standards of teaching and learning and academic success for all our students. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Montagno. And again, Mr. Sheehan, thank you for this appointment. Again, we talked last time, we talked about the most recent principal appointments, about the amount of institutional knowledge that has come into the administration with these appointments, and we certainly want to recognize that, and congratulations to you and to your family on this night. This is an extremely important position, as I know you know, having been in the building for as long as you have. I don't think it's a coincidence that the individuals, your three predecessors, have each gone on to other leadership positions in the district after having been the chief academic officer in the flagship school. It is a critically important position. It is, in a lot of ways, the crossroads of teaching and learning, which is what we want the district to be about. And it's a position where the expectations are extremely high because, as you said, the standards are high in the high school. Their standards are high throughout the district, and certainly the assistant principal overseeing curriculum and supervision, in some ways more so than any other individual at the administrative level, is expected to make sure that those standards continue to move forward and continue to be high. So congratulations and good luck, because it is quite a job that you've inherited. So.
Thank you very much.
At this time, I would also like to introduce you to the newest appointment for the assistant principalship at Coelho Middle School, Kelly Schwanat. Kelly's did her undergraduate work at UMass Dartmouth, and she majored in English, in which she taught for 11 years. She also received an administrative leadership degree, master's degree, from American International College. Currently, at least for this second, Kelly, in fact, has been an assistant principal at Westport Middle School for the past 2 years. That school is closing tomorrow. So they have closed the school. Kelly was looking for a job. We're very, very happy to be able to hire her so she wouldn't be unemployed too long. But she brings to us not just the experience of being an assistant principal at a middle school level, but she also led the professional development and the implementation of the district determined measures in Westport. And what I thought was very impressive in the interview that I had with her, but also on her resume, was her forte in aligning student learning objectives and goals for special education students, as well as those students on a Section 504 plan. As I said, she taught English for 11 years. She comes with great recommendations. I know that the interview committee at Coelho and the interview committee at Central Office was very impressed with her. And I want to welcome her personally to the district, and I think she's going to do a great job. Kelly Schwinnow.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize we were preparing speeches.
I didn't
but-
tell you that. We wanted to see you impromptu, how you were going to
Excellent,
do.
excellent. I am very excited to join the team here. When I interviewed, I walked into Coelho, and there was an immediate sense of connection. It was very comfortable for me, and then I met with the principal, and again, there was an instant connection with Mr. Bowles, and then that was solidified in the interview process. I think that together we're going to make a great team, and we're going to be able to impact student learning in a positive way. I do have a very strong curriculum background, so I'm hoping to be able to work with you in regards to that. Although I am the assistant principal, I do feel that I can impact student learning in regards to curriculum, and I'm very excited to be here.
As you should, because every administrator should feel as though they are responsible for making sure that the teaching, the learning, the curriculum instruction is moving forward. And certainly your credentials speak for themselves. And I think if you haven't noticed already, you will soon, that you're joining an outstanding building community in Coelho. You got to put up with Mr. Bowles, but even even that notwithstanding, it really is. It's a strong faculty, it's a strong team, great families, and a very vibrant student body. So. I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself. It will be challenging, as are all of our administrative positions, but we certainly welcome you, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions from the committee?
No, welcome.
Welcome's important. There you go. Welcome. Good luck. You'll have a busy summer, and you'll have a very busy school year, but we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, speaking of people who are busy, Mr. Furtado, if you could come join the school committee.
It's not busy anymore.
And Mr. Furtado, I know there's a briefing that's been prepared on our budgetary contingency planning. This is mercifully our final budgetary contingency planning for the time being, and that would be a good time to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've gone through several iterations of budget adjustments and exploring ways to address the challenges posed by the FY16 budget. I think we've ended up in the best possible place we could. The least impact on our students and classrooms, and yet still meeting the demands that FY16 placed upon us. I'm happy to answer any specific questions. I tried to cover all of the outcomes in the memo and provide the committee with alternatives should you want to entertain those.
Mr. Tyler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, I appreciate all the hard work that's been done by the administration to bring this forward to the committee. And mine's more of a comment more than looking at what you put in front of us, but this school district has made very achievable goals in the last 10 years. We've made great strides in our academic and our sports programs and whatever. And when we keep seeing something like this where cut, I just hope people are going to understand we cannot sustain making strides and goals in the Attleboro School District if we continue down a path like this. Because you can have 10 years of progress, and when you're seeing something like this that's put in front of you, 2 years of this can wipe out 10 years of progress in a hurry.
I think we're going to take a progress hit and a fairly substantial one this year. Again, as was pointed out, we have significant class size issues, and we're in June. We're not in September. Those conditions could get substantially worse. One of the critical points that I've been trying to make, is this is a structural problem. As the committee knows, and as we talked about before, we're running essentially a $70 million enterprise, and the net money we had to work with this year to accomplish managing a $70 million enterprise was essentially $500,000, and that is not going to address the needs of a $70 million operation. It's just not. And until the funding structure is altered, the prognosis going forward is pretty dire.
And if I can follow that up just for a second, I'm just going to take it line by line when we're saying there used to be anticipated surplus to pay off special education. The only reason that surplus was realized is because it was basically a spending freeze put in effect in February?
In mid-year, yeah, we hit the brakes pretty hard.
Earlier.
Affected supplies. And I'm just trying to put this in a reality to everybody. So basically we said, nobody's spending any money. We need to stop right now because we don't know where we're going to end up.
Correct. And not just supplies, Mr. Tyler, but we had a hiring freeze as well. So again, classroom experience was affected, where we didn't replace positions and brought substitutes in. That's not, an optimal condition. We want stability in the classroom. So that was not done as well as it could have been had we had the budget to entertain those things.
Okay, and then we go to item number 2, a 25% reduction in school supplies, which was basically shut off in February 2015. So now we're saying we're going to
Do it
reduce
again.
it by another 25%, which the schools have not received really very limited supplies since February. We'll put on a very short leash, if you will.
Yes.
So we cut that.
And
And
again,
we got
we've spoken
elimination
about
of
that.
sped.
That's the discretionary funds that we have a very small bucket of, and again, as you're trying to point out, that there's no way to recover from that once you make that cut. That's very, very real situation in the classroom.
And I'm not trying to pick upon the recommendations that are put forward to us by
Right.
the administration. This is what we have to do when we have a budget shortfall of this amount of money. But then we have elimination of sped consultant, which we have problems. This committee has, it's been brought to the front over the last couple of months. We've had problems in special education that we're trying to solve.
Yes.
So yet we're reducing out of that line too. And then we have an additional reduction of athletics where we've, just my opinion on this one, I think the committee would probably agree with me, but we really got the Attleboro athletic program, now being a member of the Hockomock League or whatever, with higher expectations or whatever, we've kind of got them, if not into the upper tier of the Hockomock by their competitiveness of the students that participate, but now we're going to cut that down. So the strides that they made, we're going to take away from that. And then we have a suspension of funding for one math coach, which we all know that's been a priority for the last probably 6 years about math. So these are all things that were prioritized before to get us into being a prideful school district that, we pride ourselves in instruction, education, in the normal classroom, but we also know that we want well-rounded students that have the opportunity for after-school activities, athletics, or whatever it may be, to participate at the top of the field, if you will. When I say top of the field, I don't mean it that way, but the top of the level where they should be, that they deserve to be. And we are sitting here again today, reducing all that.
And as this committee has said before, we're no longer in a position where we can make marginal changes and satisfy budgetary needs. We're hitting core issues.
I think just last statement, is it clear to say, is it proper to say, that almost looks like for the last couple of years that we're not going, the school funding for some reason by the state, they seem to have capped things than what they were before. There was a higher percentage given to the schools?
I think that, yes, I think if you are chronically getting 2 and 3% increases in state aid, that's not sufficient to address your needs. But that's, if that was our only problem, that would be a good problem to have. We have costs that are not in our control that are, expanding at, 6%, and there's just simply no way to accommodate that.
Yeah, because I want everybody to realize what this whole committee knows here. Until there is a change in the state formula that looks a little more positively of Mount Attleboro and the gains that they've made in the last 10 years, or there's a commitment on the city not to just meet net school spending at a minimum level, this is where we're going. This is the road we're going to continue walking down. I mean, that's a pretty fair statement, I would believe, in what we've dealt with for the last couple of years.
I think the dynamics of the FY16 budget are going to be consistent for the next 2 or 3 years anyway, yeah.
Short of a major variable change.
Short of a
which
variable-
we don't know.
variable
There's no
change.
reason to expect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I appreciate your candid responses. I just want everybody to kind of grasp what we're dealing with here, because I said there's been a lot of great strides in this school in the last 10 years that we're all proud of. And the previous school committee started this. We didn't start it. We're trying to expand it, if you will, and have a clearer picture of what 5 years from now is going to look like. But we have all this great vision and all the work done by the strategic committee that, has a pretty clear-cut plan for Attleboro that it's going to be flexible, but that can all be thrown out the window because we can't even sustain what we have. So we have a, this plan that we want to be somewhere, but in reality, if we continue down this road, we're not going to progress this system. We're only going to regress it. And that is a very saddening and heartbreaking thing as a school committee member and as a parent to sit here and actually hear that. That's not, we deserve better than that in Attleboro. I'm sorry. We deserve better than that, and this is not a road that we want to walk down. There has to be something, whether or not it's through public engagement or whatever. And I know the chairman has been very involved in that, but this is not acceptable to me. That plain and simple. It's not acceptable to me to see this in front of me this year, knowing that basically the faucet was shut off in February to do everything we can on our side, and now we got to take that surplus and we got to wipe that off, and we got to wipe all these other gains made up. Just, I'm hot in it. That's all. I don't have anything more to say. I will agree to these cuts because they have to be done, and we have to do it. But it's not fair to the students of Attleboro that we're supposed to serve. That's all.
There's no, thank you. I mean, there's no question. I mean, these are, we'd like to get to a point where the school committee can pass a motion related to the budget without holding our nose, but tonight is not that night.
No.
So, and I appreciate Mr. Tyler's comments, drawing the connection between our first agenda item and this one.
Yep.
Because, again, we start with strategic planning for a reason. A variable has to change. This is not a sustainable situation. And I think that the district is best positioned to argue for changing variables if we can make the argument as to the potential dividends that can be realized in the event those variables change. And I think the sequence is critically important. This problem, as Mr. Tyler has said, is not going away. This problem is systemic. This problem is real. And before we get to the point where we're generating the types of headlines that we've seen in this area just recently, we need to first put forth a plan that demonstrates to the community the potential for good in the event variables change, and a plan hopefully to avoid, not just avoid catastrophe, but to have a forward-looking vision that, I don't know that the U.S. government knew how to pay for the moon landing prior to articulating a desire to go there. But I do think that there's some logic to that sequence. So I think we're going to go to Mrs. Zito, and then I know Mr. Withers has a comment as well.
I think actually we've been limited with our funding. It's amazing that we've made the progress that we have, which is a credit to, I think, our school system.
I agree.
But we just can't keep it up. It's going to fall short, and it's going to be the children that are losing. And that's a distraction for the city, because our city needs they're coming up in the world. They'll be running the city in a few more years. And if they haven't got the background of the funds that they're losing out on now, the whole city's gonna suffer, which is kind of a sad thing.
It's absolutely true that the future of the community rests with the future of the schools, and it's part of what our obligation is, I think, as a school committee, is to continue to articulate that we are not advocating for a department that benefits the few or a particular demographic, people with kids.
No, we're not being extravagant.
Absolutely not.
And I think actually the progress that we've made with the lack of funds is amazing.
Very true. Very true. Mr. Withers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have one point, but before I get to that, I just want to add, just for Mr. Tyler's comment, because I think it's important, and all the cuts that you're talking about that we're probably going to be making tonight. That's in addition to all the cuts that are already made, which includes workforce reduction of over 6 teachers, 9 paras, and additional staff. So, I mean, that just adds salt to the wound. But I mean, that's important to get out there for everyone to remember that these are the last cuts after a lot of difficult cuts or reductions have already been made.
After a year full of cuts.
Yeah. One thing I did want to thank you about, because it was something I was going to ask, is that I was happy to see that you included some, potential for next year, what we should be looking at. So, what we should be looking at going forward. Not that any of, the options are things that I think anyone, looks at and is excited about, obviously, but we need to, as a district and as administration, I think you need to, start planning, tomorrow, what are we going to do next May? That doesn't mean that, we start threatening to shut down an elementary school, but, do we look at, course loads in the high school, and is there a way to change that? Do we look at, different our special education programs, and do we need to modify that? But there are systemic problems, and if the funding isn't going to improve in the near future, we need to have a plan, or start to develop a plan, so that we don't continue to, cut off our priorities and increase our class sizes.
Absolutely true. We are not innocent. We have improvements that we can make and need to make, but again, it's going to be marginal. It's not going to address the problem fully, but we can certainly make a contribution to the problem.
And I think that that includes having to look at hard choices going forward that we would need to make that wouldn't be popular, and that that no one wants to think about. But that type of, I think, at least brainstorming needs to continue.
Yeah, we're not in a position where we can keep anything off the table. We're not there.
Yeah, that's alarming and distressing, but it's absolutely true. And I think Mr. Withers articulates it well, and with Mr. Furtado's comments, that we really have 2 problems here. We have a structural problem for which there aren't any easy answers, and then we've got a priority issue, I think, that has to do with our priorities as a school system in terms of tough choices that we need to make, and priorities citywide, that the community has to decide if we're going to prioritize in a way that can help mitigate these problems. I mean, anyone that says, there was a lot of talk, frankly, at the municipal council about the difficulty of the budget, and I know at least one individual said this is, absolutely the best we could do and avoid layoffs. Well, that's fine, except that we didn't avoid layoffs, okay? They were all concentrated on the school side. That is not avoiding layoffs,
Right.
okay? That's just prioritizing in a way that results in layoffs on this side for the second consecutive year. And so while it is true that there's a structural problem for which no one right now has a solution, and no one should be expected to have one, there are opportunities for mitigation, and there will be opportunities for mitigation throughout this fiscal year, and it's my hope that we see some of them. Mr. Larson.
I know we're concentrating a lot of what's going to start in a couple days, but I think we also need to kind of step back and really thank the administration and everyone involved. I mean, we are in the luxury, and I hate to use it that way, but of ending the year in the black.
Yes.
And I think we really need to remind ourselves that, this district being run the way it's being run, with the people running it the way they're running it, we ended it positively, financially speaking. We've paid all of our snowplow bills. We're not putting them off. We have paid our increase in medical insurance that we've been paying for the last 2 months. We did not put that off. We have paid our 30% increase to our utilities this year. God knows how you did that. But we have done all that, and we have still managed to end the year where we told the community we would. And I think the community needs to realize we're doing what we're saying we're doing. We're being responsible with the money that they're giving us, and we need to let them know that. And so this is my attempt at letting you know that. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that is an implicit commendation of the tremendous work that Mr. Furtado has done since his return. But I'll just make it an explicit commendation on the work that Mr. Furtado has done. That there are countless times throughout the course of this year where the thought of what would have happened had you not returned has occurred to some of us, and I don't think those moments have not been
Wakes
without.
up in the middle of
It
the night,
does.
doesn't
It does. And so, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Withers.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Mr. Larson. I don't think anyone can question, that the administration and we haven't been faithful and responsible stewards of the money. I think that we've shown that, and I also agree. There's no doubt that the administration has done a good job to ensure that we have been able to pay our bills. I think the only thing I would just say is, at what cost does that come? Being able to finish in the black comes at a cost of, that eventually will catch up to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
And I think it's our responsibility to, it may sound like we're beating a dead horse. We've had this topic on for several weeks now, but it will be on in the weeks going forward as well. We will spend time this summer discussing the budget. We will spend time this summer talking about some of these trends that we've seen in state funding over the past 10 years and how that's plateaued in the second decade since Ed Reform of '93, and how, while that funding has plateaued, certain costs, particularly in the special education and health insurance areas, have continued to grow at an exponential rate such that it's absorbing all of our flexibility. And when you absorb all of an organization's flexibility, it becomes virtually impossible to identify priorities and move forward. To my earlier point, if you're in a position where in order to have priorities, you need to advocate for the organization, then the organization better have a plan as to what it's going to do in the event that investment is made. And I think that is why that sequence is so important. Other questions or comments related to budgetary contingency planning? Now, Mr. Furtado, and I did step out for a second, so I apologize if I don't think I missed this, but the motions or the draft motions circulated to the committee, there has been a $75,000 adjustment with regard to that. It is neutral with regard to its impact, but in terms of the motion of what the committee needs to do to adopt a particular operating budget, we're $75,000 less. Do you want to explain that briefly?
Sure. The committee knows there's a Medicare agreement with the city of Attleboro, a 50-50 split, which is actually good for the schools. There are communities that don't have that kind of agreement, and everything goes back to
Stepping in
the
it now, Mr. Furtado.
back to the general fund. And anyway, part of the budgeting process on the municipal side is that they essentially forward $75,000 of that money to us. And it's typically in a separate line for appropriation, but it was in the total budget was combined. So the 69-1 that's in your memo included that $75,000 money, and should not have been part of the appropriation, identified as the appropriation. So the appropriation is $75,000 less, but that Medicaid money goes right into paying off of special education tuition. So it's not a budget reduction. It's just an inaccurate number for the appropriation from the city of Attleboro.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that worked.
Thank you for that explanation. Now, in addition to that, there's one other minor adjustment. I believe the memo identified a $540,000 final reduction to get us to the even number that we need to be. That's actually $530,000. Again, Mr. Tyler very eloquently identified the bullet points and the implications of the bullet points. The $300,000 is the advance payment of special education tuitions. That is significantly below the threshold that the district is permitted to advance pay. It is significantly above where we would prefer to advance pay because it does chip away at our surplus. The 25% reduction, which it may even be a little bit higher, but the $100,000 number is accurate. $100,000 out of a already very supply budget that's very stretched, that is going to hurt. There are going to be, particularly I suspect in the second half of the year, there are going to be real implications to that in a way that is going to be felt in the classroom. And I would, as I said, there'll be opportunities for mitigation throughout the course of this year, and I think it would be irresponsible for this school committee not to continue to advocate in the hope that we may see some level of mitigation, particularly with regard to that item. We need paper all year, not just for the first half of the year. The elimination of the SPED consultation services. Frankly, this school committee has been asking questions related to special education to make sure that we are fulfilling our obligations and doing so in a fiscally responsible manner over the course of the past year. I think the administration would not be surprised to learn that those questions and those agenda items will continue over the course of the summer until the school committee feels as though we are where we need to be with regard to that department. But the recommendation of the administration is based off of the idea that until we answer some of those questions and develop a better direction, that is just an investment that is not yielding the benefits that we would like it to at this time. The reduction in athletics operating budget, again, this is something that families will feel. Participating in athletics is a vital part of particularly a high school education, and that we are disproportionately balancing that budget the way that we are is not good. It is, I think, necessary, but it's extremely sad that these measures are necessary. And then finally, the suspension of funding for the math coach at Brennan Middle School. This in no way should be construed as this school committee or the administration backing off our commitment to math instruction. We have some staffing anomalies at Brennan, particularly a new assistant principal who has learned recently, or if not will at this moment, that the expectation is that based on what his expertise is, that he'll be able to contribute in that effort in a way that currently, we would prefer have our instructional team in place the way that we will. In the event that we're able to get to the point where we are able to fund that, obviously, that's something that we will, we'll want to revisit this with urgency. But unfortunately, these are the types of compromises that we're making to get to where we need to. So we've used, I've tried to make this point over and over again the last several weeks, that using an exact number with regard to this, the exact number is the underlying operating budget. That's the number that has been appropriated. That's the number that we have to work within. Exactly what is the gap, what gets funded, what doesn't, that is always a moving target to some degree, and so we fully expect that there'll be transfers throughout the summer and in the fall as we try to identify areas that need to sort of be patched up. But for right now, it's our hope that through this reduction, we'll, one, get to even as we're obligated to do, but also be in a place where if we are able to identify flexibility, and we know it'll be minimal flexibility, but if we are, we'll be able to address some of these sacrifices and difficult decisions that have been made at the building level and here over the past several weeks. Mr. Furtado, was that a fair
Yes,
characterization?
that's our expectation.
So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to endorse the school administration's actions to close the existing budgetary gap through reduction totaling $530,000 in order to adhere to the operating budget appropriated by the Attleboro Municipal Council.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. A motion, I would now like to entertain a motion to approve an FY16 operating budget of $69,048,623.97.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We do have a few other quick budgetary issues. We've said a couple of times now that, Mr. Fowler, perhaps you could just walk through the process of the surplus both on the operating budget side and on the transportation side, and the sort of sequence that needs to play out over the next several months.
Sure. Again, we have an expectation that the transportation surplus We still have a couple of payrolls to process through, but we'll be somewhere in the $90,000 to $100,000 range that automatically gets put back into the general fund of the city of Attleboro. So that's a windfall for the city, we have, as this committee knows, some profound technology needs, so we're hoping to have discussions regarding that surplus with the city later on. On the operating side, we're somewhere in the $400,000 to $500,000 range before the prepay of sped tuition. So we're going to end up on our at the end of the year somewhere around 2, I think. At this point, at the as things close, there's a whole series of events that are going to be happening. They don't certify free cash till November, and there's a really good reason for that. And so we've got to reconcile some grants. We will be getting some invoices in that fell in the crack in the desk, or so we're going to have to make some appeals to the municipal council in the fall. To pay prior year funds. That's a pretty regular event. You hope that it's kind of a $5,000 to $10,000 event, not the $25,000 to $30,000 event that it was this past year. So there are a whole bunch of kind of reconciliations and adjustments that'll be made through probably September, where we'll finally have a final number, hard number. For the committee in terms of where we stand in terms of a surplus going forward. And then that'll be certified later in the fall by the city and provided for us for use.
So essentially, there are two relatively modest pools of money that, as a result of the very strenuous efforts made, commented on here tonight, to freeze hiring and spending, that will be identified as the schools close our fiscal books this week. That money is automatically returned to the municipality. It has been a fairly standard operating procedure here and elsewhere for those funds to ultimately then be returned for the schools to help us deal with our budgetary challenges. I do think, given these particular difficult circumstances, would be appropriate for the school committee to add our voice to the plea or the request for those funds to be returned, so that way we can mitigate or attempt to mitigate the difficult circumstances that we're in. So that's a sort of a general comment, and I entertain that motion momentarily. But in addition to that, with regard to the transportation funds, as Mr. Furtado has said, there have been conversations ongoing between the school administration and the city administration about addressing some of these technology priorities, particularly on the infrastructure level that are overdue. And I think that while the schools are in a position now where we'll take any amount of funding from anyone with a checkbook to address some of these issues. I think that these conversations seem to be well thought out, and it's our hope that by adding the committee's endorsement to the use of those funds, that perhaps we can address some of these technology issues in the near future. Not something anyone is happy about, and I understand that, but the situation could be worse. So first, the general motion, just in terms of adding our stamp to the request, in the hope of having these funds returned, or any investment possible. Motion to request the municipal government return all unexpended funds from FY15 upon their certification for use in mitigating the dire financial circumstances under which the Attleboro schools will operate in FY16.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Talley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would really hope that the city council and city administration will really look favorably towards this motion. For the last couple of years, and no pun intended, but we've been thrown under the bus as a school committee about how we've exceeded what we felt was the proper number to put in for transportation. And I just want people to realize we only have so much control over this. We're a public school. I know I've said it over and over, but some people don't get it. Some people I've talked to just don't get it. We're a public school. We have to take with everybody.
Whoever walks in the door.
We're not a charter school. We can't select. You know, McKinley-Vento bill, again, you know, I don't want to pick on it, and I'm only going to pick on it for one reason. It's been declared an unfunded mandate, and yet again, even though I know we don't have a final budget from the Mass House or the Senate yet, but it looks like they're only going to fund it again at 50%. So
Yes.
this is something that we didn't create, the administration didn't create, and the people that we serve didn't create. This is created because it's an unfunded mandate. If they funded it 100%, we wouldn't have these problems over the last 5 or 6 years, if not longer. So it's not something we created, but through a better system of checks and balances, if you will, and communication between the school administration and the city, monthly updates, bi-weekly, whatever it was, we've ended up in the black. Welcome. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, administration. I know Mark wasn't the only one on this. There was administrators working behind the scenes to get us here. So I really hope that the city council and city administration will look upon this motion very positively and say, yes, school committee and administration and everybody else involved, great job. We're glad you were looking over as best as you can. And of course, we want to give this money back to the schools in the tough times that you're in. Because if they see it any other way, we're really going to have a problem moving forward. I will really have a problem moving forward. Because, you know, we've admitted that we have mistakes before. Not mistakes, but they just weren't maybe a proper oversight, and we made sure all the safeguards were put in place for it. And this is what we came to.
Well, I hope the municipal council can see that, you know, the work the school committee did in terms of allowing reorganization and replacement, and, you know, conversely, the work that the people who were appointed did to make sure that the system was actually running the way it should. You know, it's not easy to do that as a public body, and I thought the school committee showed great courage to do that. I think the result, you know, speaks for the work you had to do, and I hope the council, you know, has regained some trust and belief in what's going on in the school department in terms of transportation, because we, you know, we are doing our job.
That's all we ask. Just do your job, you know. All right. Any other further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And finally, with regard to the specific surplus related to transportation, and again, our technology infrastructure issues have been well documented. They've been discussed at great length. I appreciate the school administration and the city administration and discussions that I understand to have taken place in the past several weeks. This number that we're talking about as the potential surplus with regard to transportation will not, by any means, solve our technology infrastructure issues, but it certainly would be a wise investment in terms of advancing the priorities that I know the school department and the city administration share in terms of making sure that we're utilizing technology as a school department should in 2015. So I just entertain a motion to endorse the use of unexpended funds from the transportation budget in FY15 to be used in conjunction with other funds allocated by the municipal government for the purposes of advancing specific technology infrastructure priorities.
Second.
And just for the translation, we're talking about switches.
Yes. The kind of basic infrastructure to build a wireless environment in our buildings,
Correct.
short of the access points themselves.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so we're going to transition seamlessly, I hope, into our transportation update. This is a discussion that we mercifully got away from for several months, but we returned to last week, and this has to do with the implementation of our transportation services for the 15-16 academic year. Mr. Furtado telecasted a expected request of the committee with regard to essentially freezing the enrollments in the transportation services for students who enroll after a certain date. We enroll students year-round, obviously, but we tend to see a crush in the summer. We previously this year identified a series of things and practices or systems that needed to be reformed in order for our transportation system to move in a more efficient manner. The request tonight is to essentially have a 2-week freeze such that students who enroll after a particular deadline will understand that they will not be entitled to the transportation service for the first essentially week of school, and then after that they will be. But we'll obviously try to make the population affected as small as possible, such that if we can get students on the bus immediately, we will. But there'll be a period where everyone will need to understand that if you don't get in to enroll until by August 21st, which is the end of the sort of official enrollment time period, then you may have to wait several days before you're officially assigned to a bus. Is that a fair?
Yeah, and for the committee's benefit, we obviously we hear about the students who want to enroll and come to school. What we never hear is about the students who have left. So there's a period of time, just prior to the start of school and the week after, where, from our perspective, from our systems, buses look like they have 70 kids on them. 15 of those kids don't live in Attleboro anymore, but we don't know that until school starts. So there's a period where putting students on the bus is almost impossible until you have a shakeout as to who's coming to school, who's taking the bus, and who belongs in the bus. That problem will be very particular on the heavy routes, and we certainly don't want to be making commitments to people. We will ultimately make commitments to people if we have to add a bus or whatever the circumstances, but initially the first week of school, we don't want to be making commitments to people that we can't fulfill until we understand who's supposed to be on the bus. That there are other buses that won't be in that circumstance that we can accommodate right away in real time, but there are going to be circumstances where we simply cannot accommodate the request just because of the shakeout at the beginning of the year.
So our challenge here is, obviously, as Mr. Furtado said, students who depart the district without telling anyone they're leaving. There is a phrase for that. I did just quickly check the dictionary to see if it would be appropriate to be used here. It's not, as it turns out. So we'll just say when the students leave without telling anyone, and then it results in enrollment issues. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Anyone have any questions, Mrs. Scales?
Just as long as we will make every effort to make sure everybody knows that there will be a freeze after August 21st, so make sure we use whatever measures we can to communicate that so people know to enroll.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that is of critical importance. Obviously, we need to get the word out. Mr. Withers?
Any legal concern with this? Is it-
I think that, to the best of our knowledge right now, that is not the case, but as part of the understanding would be that in the event there's any objection raised by our council, that the implementation of that would be affected.
Again, I want to assure the committee, we're not going to be denying transportation. I think that would be a legal issue.
It's just a matter of
We're
scheduling.
simply scheduling the transportation, and that, the week of school requires time for some routes, certainly not system-wide.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to authorize the central administration to institute as necessary a moratorium on transportation services for students who enroll in the Attleboro schools after Friday, August 21st, 2015, whereas the authorization will cease as of Wednesday, September 9th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Tyler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, just a quick comment. I believe it's about time. I really believe it's about time. The amount of effort and resources that people put in, the administration and support staff, to handle the select group of people who don't want to sign up at the deadline has definitely had a negative effect on our school openings.
On the entire population, yes.
It has, and this committee, we went through what we would consider an unacceptable school opening. We've made a lot of changes to make sure that doesn't duplicate itself. And a lot of that, and through the years, has been because of this. It's because of people who are not signing up on time. We're trying to work everything in here, and it's just not possible. So I think
Yeah.
we need this little break. We're not denying anybody anything. All we're
Correct.
saying is we need to get control of this thing so we can definitively tell people, parents and students, where they're going to be bused.
time
Instead
and
of
where.
just trying to basically, draw things out of a hat, because it's too complex for that. We need to have a plan going in. So, in my opinion, I think it's long coming. We should have had this a couple of years ago. I really do. I just believe that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Furtado. Okay, our next agenda item is the superintendent evaluation. This is an obligation that all school committees have throughout the district. to issue an evaluation of their superintendent. This is something I conferred with the superintendent about over the past week. One of our challenges with regard to superintendent evaluations, and I don't know to what degree, although I know to some degree that other districts run into the same challenge, is that we have a evaluation process contemplated by the superintendent's contract. We have an evaluation process contemplated by school committee policy. And we have an evaluation process contemplated by Massachusetts regulation. Unfortunately, those are three different processes that are not particularly consistent with one another. That was one of the things that Mr. Sheehan and I spoke about, and I did briefly address this matter with the committee in the context of the contractual component. Essentially, what the consensus was formed was that when in doubt, we'll go with the highest of the laws, which is the state regulation, which requires a ranking in four separate categories: professional culture, family and community engagement, teaching all students, and curriculum and instruction. And then a fifth overall category. There are four ratings that school committees and all evaluators are able to give to the individual that they are evaluating. That is needs improvement. I skipped one, I apologize. Unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, and exemplary. I would just say, and Mr. Sheehan, you could obviously feel free to comment on this, that I think trying to reduce the assessment of the chief executive of a school district to a word or one of these four categories, I think shows sort of the. I just don't think it's particularly helpful, and frankly, I don't know if you want to share any comments on this, but I just don't think we could possibly convey in a word what our expectations are as to what could be done better, or what our why we're grateful for things that are going well. I just think it's a very flawed system, but it's one that we have a legal obligation to do. Is it?
I don't have any comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sheehan.
Yeah,
So,
I think you've said it well, as far as the varying degrees about what the expectations of superintendent's evaluations are at different venues in different areas. It needs some work.
I agree with that. And in terms of trying to bring our policies in line with, the state system, I do think that is something that we should, particularly as we prepare for a superintendent transition, is something that this committee should and will look at in the coming months. But for right now, I would just like to entertain a motion to grant an evaluation of proficient in each of the four standards and an overall rating of proficient for Mr. Sheehan.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Okay, so we'll move on now to the consideration of the collective bargaining agreement with the paraprofessional bargaining unit of the Attleboro schools. This is the last of our collective bargaining agreements of the first round. We do have two units that were on one-year contracts for the 14-15 academic year, and we'll be revisiting those in the coming weeks. But for the time being, this is the last of this group, and I would be remiss if I didn't extend my gratitude to Mr. Furtado for his work on this over the course of the past several months. Mr. Sawyer, who played the role of closer, I'm told in the past couple of weeks. Unclear if he had any entry music, as closers tend to do. And then, of course, to the paraprofessionals of the district who, for anyone who's ever spent any time in any of our school buildings, or frankly school buildings generally, it is quite evident the role that they play, not just ensuring that the educational services are delivered to students, but that the building culture is one in which students and families feel welcome and feel connected thereto. So to all of our paraprofessionals, for the work that you do every day, we are tremendously grateful to you. We look forward to working with you in the coming years. So a motion to approve the proposed collective bargaining agreement with the Attleboro paraprofessional organization.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Singer?
Yes.
Mrs. Zito? Mr. Tyler?
Abstain.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy, yes. Mrs. Scales? Mrs. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Withers?
Abstain.
Okay, the motion will pass 6-0-2. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item. We are going to skip it. This is a uniform employment agreement for our building administrators, which our legal counsel just needs just a little more time on. It's nothing out of the ordinary or anything different than frankly, the agreements that our administrators are currently under. I just asked them to take a quick look at one last provision. I expect we'll have this to consider prior to our next meeting. Our next proposed uniform non-union personnel contract, these are for the few dozen employees who are not part of a bargaining unit in the district. They are also, generally speaking, not of an administrator rank, but frankly, when you look through our employment agreements that are currently in place, and several of them are one-year agreements because of the wage freeze that we instituted last year, if you look through them, there are clear distinctions amongst them based on when the employee came into the service of the district, who was superintendent at that time, what school committee was in office, and this is our attempt to make them uniform across the board. Frankly, as you probably noticed in reviewing them, there's nothing particularly different. It's, in some cases, it's just a matter of stylistic or rhetorical issues, but we're just trying to make them consistent. So, frankly, it's easier on the administrative staff when the individuals are being appointed, and it can just provide for a clearer understanding of the rights and responsibilities and just consistency across the board. So, at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the proposed uniform non-union personnel contract. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Finally, we have two policies before us tonight. One is a policy amendment reflecting the changes that we've discussed both at the policy subcommittee level and here at the full school committee level. It is a continuation of the work that we began last year with the reorganization of the finance, the business department, and breaking the subcommittee that at one time would oversee everything related to the business office to one group focused on finance and budget, which I think, based on the conversation tonight and over the past month, it makes clear that that's work that does warrant its own subcommittee and will for some time, and another focused on the infrastructure and facilities, which is an issue that is both referenced in the pillars of the strategic plan and also one that continues to pose a series of challenges for any $70 million organization with the volume of infrastructure that we have, but that's certainly the case in Attleboro. And the changes essentially are, it's a renaming of the Curriculum and Instruction Subcommittee to the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee for reasons that we've talked about at length here and again at the Policy Subcommittee, and also a recognition of the job description and personnel responsibilities that have always fallen under the Policy Subcommittee but just haven't been referenced in their name. The second new policy essentially identifies some of the responsibilities that already take place in terms of the student achievement reports that the school committee sees each fall, and in terms of the budget that obviously the school committee grapples with each spring. And it also sets up a calendar in which a report will be issued yearly, I believe it's late summer, on the infrastructure challenges facing the district. Frankly, as Mr. Furtado could say, this is a report that generally is worked out annually between the administration and the facilities vendor. The goal here is to bring it before the committee to make sure that the committee is informed and give the school committee the tools necessary to advocate for some of the priorities that are identified in that report, as particularly during the capital improvements process. And then as part of some of the work that's taking place in the Leadership Advisory Board to make sure that job descriptions are vetted thoroughly and are kept consistent with one another. That would be something the Policy and Personnel Subcommittee would look at on an annual basis to make sure that we don't go extended periods of time without looking at job descriptions or some of these other organizational structural issues. Again, I know we've talked about this multiple subcommittee meetings and a couple times here, but if there are any other questions or comments related to it, now would be a good time. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve the policy amendments to School Committee Policy BDE and to approve in its entirety School Committee Policy BDEE governing subcommittee structure and jurisdiction.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. I would just say quickly from a policy standpoint, this is something that Mr. Withers and I have spoken about in recent days. There are some outstanding issues that have come before the policy subcommittee that I would anticipate eventually probably working their way up to the school committee in the coming weeks. It would have been nice if we had been able to advance those a little bit faster, but when we are dealing with a number of issues that we are, and frankly lost a 6-week period to weather, our calendar is just not where we would prefer it to be. But they include the screening process for enrollment at kindergarten. That's something that has been talked about at the subcommittee level, and I expect that that discussion will continue. There's the issue related to a policy that was changed about 20 years ago or so, that has not come up in any specific instances yet, but we'd prefer that it did not, and it has to do with children of staff members and whether their application to attend the Attleboro schools, at one time that was a right to staff members. That right was taken away and was given to the school committee to approve an application into the district, not just for staff children, but for any non-resident children. And one of the things that was been discussed at the subcommittee level is the idea that as a policy-making body, that decision-making authority shouldn't necessarily rest here because we, whenever we can avoid it, avoid making decisions with regard to discrete individuals. I think that's particularly true when we're talking about individual students. So we're looking at some reform to that. It's something, frankly, it's fairly common in other districts, and something that I would anticipate we would be addressing in the coming weeks. And the other two have to do with communications by the school administration, both to the municipal government and to the media, and wanting to get to a place in which those communications are taking place and are consistent with one another and consistent with the district-wide vision, and essentially vesting that authority in the superintendent in a way that we can try to avoid having as many spokespersons as we do problems. And as we've talked about tonight, from a budgetary standpoint, we're not short on challenges, and I think it's important that we try to develop a more coherent way in which we communicate as an organization. So no action on those tonight, nothing to consider right now. But again, I know sometimes the summer can be a sleepy period. I don't necessarily anticipate that being the case, and I think that is reflective of the circumstances that we are currently grappling with. Finally, we have, speaking of our summer, the school committee schedule. It is a fairly busy one. We will, I don't anticipate another regular meeting of the school committee until July 20th. That's about 3 weeks from now. And then we have our regularly scheduled meetings in August. I guess we have one additional one that was added for August. Right now, our current calendar only goes through August 17th. This calendar is reflective of some of the issues that we have going on in the district right now. We have a leadership transition that is underway. We have a strategic planning process that's underway. I've said before that I anticipate that there will be some organizations that I've had conversations with about possibly coming in to talk in general terms about some of the budgetary challenges that the districts across the Commonwealth are facing, and I expect that we'll be taking some time in the summer to talk about that in the hope of continuing the advocacy and the discussion related to school finance issues that have taken up a lot of time, rightfully so, over the past several weeks. So that's the school committee schedule. I would like to entertain a motion to approve the Attleboro School Committee meeting schedule from July 2015 to January 2016.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
Just
Yes, Ms.
quick-
Tyler.
Quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. December 7th, that's not a holiday?
It is not a federal holiday, no. It is a day that will live in infamy, but it is not
Okay.
not a holiday.
Okay.
It is sometimes recognized on calendars as Pearl Harbor Day, but it's not a federal holiday.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'm now curious if there are any other holidays that are on there. I don't think so, but we'll find out, I guess. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And finally, we do have a couple of brief agenda items for our executive session tonight, and therefore pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A2 and A3, the school committee will convene an executive session for purposes of conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee. The school committee will not reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Second.
And I said non-union personnel. I actually meant collective bargaining sessions with union personnel. But it's the same as we always do. Eventually, we'll have all our contracts signed. We won't have to do this anymore. Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Mrs. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Scales? Ms. Murphy, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler?
Yes.
Mrs. Zito? Ms. Singer?
Yes.
We'll take a 5-minute recess and then come back for executive session.